$1,808.45 a month. That's what one facet of a traumatic brain injury can pay, at a 70% VA rating. And here's the strange part nobody warns you about. The VA got to that number by scoring a single piece of how your brain works and setting the other 9 aside. There's also a second check the VA never bundles for you, stacked right on top of the brain injury rating. Hold on to that, because later I'll put the real dollars on the table and show you exactly how the stack gets built.
This is Erica. Look at what actually gets rated. The concussion heals. The rating is for what it leaves behind.
And this whole benefit hides in plain sight, but it all sits in one place. 38 CFR 4.124A, diagnostic code 80045, residuals of traumatic brain injury. One code, and every rule we name comes straight out of it.
I'm Emma, and by definition, a residual is what's still there after the injury settles. That code names 3 areas where a TBI leaves damage: cognitive, how you think; emotional and behavioral, how you cope; and physical, the headaches, the dizziness, the seizures.
The injury's real too, even when it's invisible on the outside. A blast wave in a convoy, an IED, a vehicle rollover, a hard fall in training. That force can bruise the brain against the skull. This is a genuine, documentable injury.
Hi all, I'm Liam. Think of it like a bell struck too hard. The ring fades, but the crack in the metal stays. Am I close, Emma?
Not quite, but close enough to use. The crack's the residual, and its size is what sets the money.
And on the cognitive side alone, that money runs from nothing all the way to 70%, which in this year's rates is $1,808 a month for a veteran alone. Then the emotional and physical pieces can add more on top of that, separately. Same injury, wildly different check.
But there's a wall. Take one symptom, count it once. Count it twice, and the VA calls that pyramiding, then denies it. You stack distinct problems, never the same one.
All of this lives in the VA's official rating schedule, the rulebook that hands every condition a code and a percentage. Nothing we say today's opinion. It's the schedule, and we'll name the exact facets and the exact dollars.
One question shows up under every TBI video, and honestly it's the one I had myself. Here it is, word for word. If my concussion healed years ago, is there anything left for the VA to even rate? The honest answer is yes. If it left damage, the event heals. The damage doesn't. And that's what we file on.
That's the whole game. Healed isn't the same as gone. And the piece that surprises people most is still coming. The 10-part way the VA scores your brain that decides everything. You'll find the whole conditions list and a free tool to see where you land at va.professorerica.com. Now let's split this injury into the tracks the VA actually pays on. So one hit splits into 3 separate tracks, and this is where the money's won or lost. Erica reads the code strict. She wants each track claimed on its own, because that's how the schedule's written. Liam keeps asking the plain question underneath. Why make you carve one injury into pieces at all? Let's actually work it.
Run the code as written. Cognitive gets rated on the facets. Emotional gets rated as a mental health condition. Physical stands on its own. That settles the frame.
My read is the average veteran files TBI and pictures one box on a form. Like a doctor writes one word, concussion, and expects one number back. Is that the trap?
That's exactly the trap, and here's a case neither of you has raised yet. Say a veteran has memory problems, plus diagnosed depression from the same injury, plus crushing headaches. Under the code, those don't merge into one TBI number. The depression peels off to the mental health formula. The headaches peel off to their own code. Only the thinking piece stays on the brain injury table.
Right, and that's the schedule's own instruction. Any residual with its own diagnosis gets evaluated separately, even when the brain injury caused it.
Hold on. So the injury that links them is also why they split apart?
Beautifully put. One cause, several distinct disabilities. And the reason the VA works this way is the same shape as a hospital billing 3 departments for one accident. The neurologist, the psychiatrist, and the pain clinic each did separate work, so each gets its own line.
I walk and talk these rules out loud on my own, and this is the one I trip on every single time. Not one injury, one rating. One injury, several tracks that combine.
So let me push you, Erica. If someone's barely functioning, why not let the VA lump it all under one big TBI number and call it a day? Isn't splitting it up just more paperwork and more risk?
Because lumping caps you low, split it, and each track pays. That's thousands a year, worth the paperwork.
But be honest with the viewer. Is or a real downside to filing more?
There is, and it matters. Every extra track can mean a separate exam and separate evidence, and a weak one can come back denied or rated at 0. So the honest rule isn't file everything. It's file every track that's genuinely its own problem and genuinely documented. Where the depression's real and diagnosed, claim it. Where the headaches are real and logged, claim them. But you never claim the same symptom twice in 2 costumes. The VA calls that pyramiding, and it kills claims.
Distinct and documented. Not everything, that's the line.
So here's where the panel lands, and the schedule backs it in writing. One brain injury can pay on several separate tracks: cognitive, emotional, and physical, and they combine. Claim each one that's truly its own problem with its own proof, never the same symptom twice. That's the frame. Now Emma's going to show you exactly how the cognitive track gets scored, because it works nothing like you'd guess.
The cognitive track gets scored in the strangest way in the whole schedule, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The code doesn't hand your brain one grade. It breaks cognition into 10 separate facets and scores each one on its own.
Which is exactly where veterans get lost. Emma, walk them up the ladder.
Here they are, by definition, straight from the table: memory, attention, and concentration. Judgment, social interaction, orientation, motor activity, visual spatial orientation, subjective symptoms like headaches and dizziness, neurobehavioral effects, communication, and consciousness. 10 windows into how the injury actually lands.
10 facets, like a report card with 10 subjects. So do they average your grades?
Not quite, and this is the whole trick. Each facet scored a level of severity: 0, 1, 2, 3, or total. The VA rations those levels in exact steps, the way I ration dark chocolate: 2 squares, never 3. Then it does something most veterans never expect.
It ignores 9 of them. Let me put the ladder on the board so you can watch a level turn into a check.
Read it off the ladder. Your overall cognitive percentage comes from your single highest facet. A 1 is 10%, a 2 is 40, a 3 is 70, and if any one facet hits total, the whole rating jumps to 100%.
Wait, run that again. So if 9 of my facets are basically fine and only 1, say my memory is scored a 3, I still land at 70%?
Yes. One facet at a 3 is 70%, no matter how mild the other 9 are. Your worst score sets the check.
Okay, that changes my whole answer. I was picturing an average dragging it down.
Everyone does. Your brain gets graded like a report card where they circle your worst subject and quietly ignore the honor roll.
Bleak, and exactly right.
Which is why the exam's everything. If the examiner writes your worst facet as a 1, when your records show a 3, you just lost 60 points and over $1,000 a month. Careful there. That worst facet rule cuts both ways.
That's the piece to carry out of this scene. One high facet lifts the whole cognitive rating, so the real fight is documenting that facet honestly and fully. Next, we take this rating and stack the other 2 tracks on top, in real dollars. Now the number I promised you up top. That second check, stacked on the brain injury, in this year's real dollars. Let's make it a person.
Meet Andre, 34, Army, took a blast in a convoy. Memory problems, diagnosed depression, and migraines, all from that one hit.
3 distinct diagnoses, each on its own track by definition. His cognitive facets top out at a level 2, so the TBI table gives him 40%. His depression, rated as its own mental health condition, comes in at 50, and his migraines, on their own code, at 30.
So 40 plus 50 plus 30, that's 120. Am I close?
Not even a little, and this is the misconception that costs people. VA ratings don't add. They combine under 38 CFR 4.25 on a whole person math. 50, then 40, then 30, combine to about 80%, not 120.
And 80%'s a very different life than 40. So watch the gap between doing this right and doing it lazy. Start with it done right. All the tracks claimed combine to 80%, which pays $2,102.15 a month for a veteran alone.
Now the lazy version. File only TBI. The examiner scores cognitive at 40% and stops. $795.84. The depression and the migraines never get their own line.
So the difference between stacking the tracks and lumping them under one is $1,306.31 every single month.
Run that across a year, and it's just over $15,600 for the exact same injuries. The only variables whether each track got claimed and documented.
Careful. That number only holds if the depression and migraines are truly their own problems with their own proof.
Exactly. Claim the same headache as a facet and again as a migraine, and the VA strikes one. That's pyramiding. Distinct problems stack. The same one, counted twice, gets cut.
Wait, real question. Does stacking the tracks mean sitting through a separate exam for each?
Sometimes yes. Sometimes one exam covers more than one. And that's the kind of question you want answered by someone who's actually run these claims. So let's get one of them on the line. Every dollar we just stacked runs through one appointment. The compensation and pension exam. It's where your lived symptoms get translated into a facet level and a percentage, and getting it wrong can turn a real injury into a flat zero on paper.
And this exam hides a rule most veterans miss. That worst facet rule only helps if the examiner's qualified to find it.
By definition, it's a specialist's job. VA policy says the first TBI exam for a veteran without an existing diagnosis has to be done by one of 4 specialists: a physiatrist, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, or a neurosurgeon, not a general provider.
That's a lot resting on one visit. Let's hear from someone who sits on the other side of it.
She knows the TBI protocol exam and the secondary tracks cold, so let's dial her in.
Glad to be on, and you named the hinge already, the nexus. That's the doctor's sentence linking a residual to your service or to a condition the VA already rates. On a TBI claim, I want 3 things in the file: each residual diagnosed, the original injury in the record, and one clean sentence tying them together.
One clean sentence. How strong does that link have to be?
Gentler than most veterans fear. The standard is, quote, at least as likely as not. Even odds clears it. You don't prove it beyond doubt, you tip it to even, and the doubt breaks your way.
Back in the stacked case, Andre asked whether stacking the tracks means a separate exam for each. Does it?
Sometimes. Cognitive, mental health, and the physical residuals may go to different examiners because each is its own field. Sometimes it's one long visit, sometimes a few. That's normal.
So where does all of it land?
It lands on VA Form 21-526-EZ. Your legal name goes up top, spelled the way it appears on your DD-214. Your social security number ties every track to one record, and your file number, sometimes the same as your SSN, sometimes not, where the wrong entry stalls the whole claim.
And name each track on it. Cognitive residuals, the mental health condition, the migraines. separately.
Exactly. On timing, your effective date's generally the day the VA receives that form. The Rule 38 CFR 3.400 says the date of the claim or the date entitlement arose, whichever's later, so file the day you're ready, not the day you feel 100%. The clock starts when you file.
So it all comes back to that worst facet rule. Document the one facet that scores highest, and let the specialist put the number on it.
That's the piece no pamphlet hands you. Read your own records first, because if a clinician already wrote down reduced memory, half your nexus is already sitting in the file. That's where I'd start. Thanks for having me on.
That's the part people fight for years to learn. Paula, thank you. Let's bring it home. Here's the whole map in one line. A brain injury heals, but the VA pays for what it leaves behind, scored across 3 tracks, and your worst facet sets the cognitive check.
Next time on the conditions list, here's the hook. There's one situation where the VA rates a brain injury even when every cognitive facet scores a clean 0. Wait until you see how that one works.
Your move tonight. Open your own records and hunt for one phrase. Reduced function. If a doctor already wrote it, half your claim's built.
And the number I'm keeping is $15,600 a year, the gap between stacking real tracks and lumping them into one.
If this map helped, hit subscribe. We work through the VA rating book condition by condition, and every like nudges it in front of another veteran staring down the same claim. And before you go, one for the comments. Did a doctor connect your brain injury to your service? Or did you have to fight for that link yourself? Weave, do not sort. Boundaries between disciplines are mostly myth.
9 out of 10, May. The missing point is for making me look too replaceable. This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.